The final episodes of The Sopranos tear apart any facade remaining of the Soprano crime family. The 17th episode of Season 6, Walk Like a Man, is one of the best examples of that. Christopher struggles with his vices in an environment full of enablers. AJ goes down a troubled path in an attempt to move on from his own sadness, a path he was put on by his father. How Chris's associates treat his struggles in personal life, along with how Tony Soprano acts as a father, reveal a disease that has taken root in this environment. A disease that the mob only wants to hide, not cure. After collecting a payment from his father-in-law, Christopher meets up with Paulie at the Bing. They exchange a few words, and Christopher gives Paulie his share of the money. Paulie is put off by Christopher toasting with a non-alcoholic beverage.
It's club soda. What's your problem? You got the problem, my friend. You're a real fucking drip lately.
Despite previously degrading Chris for his alcoholism.
And you become an embarrassment to yourself and everybody.
Paulie expects Chris to not only do business, but also follow the same formalities as everyone else, no matter how destructive that could be toward Chris's life. Tony shares the same view, throwing several snide remarks at Christopher during a family barbecue.
Never see you. What are you talking about?
He sees Christopher's sobriety as him distancing himself from his colleagues. Christopher's personal battles don't matter much to Tony unless they affect the business. Tony can't decide if he wants to treat Chris like family or like an employee. Tony's approach to dealing with personal matters in his business also affects how he goes about raising his children. After his fiancée breaks up with him, AJ is left a total wreck. When Tony initially tries to speak to AJ and comfort him, he does offer some sound advice and comforting words.
All right. No, I'm so special.
You're damn right you are.
But he quickly tears it all apart when he tells AJ to basically do what he does in every situation.
Go ahead and get a blowjob.
I don't want a blowjob.
Keep your voice down.
It's worth noting that before he went to see AJ, Tony was at the Bing trying to hook up with a stripper. He was then rudely interrupted by a phone call from Carmela telling him to go be a father. Carmela is no saint in this situation, let's make that clear. In an effort to get AJ back out into the world, Tony decides to get Patsy's son to invite AJ to a party. AJ is basically checked out the whole time and returns home drunk. Carmela wakes up Tony and expresses her anger, but Tony tells her that this is the way back to normalcy. The next time AJ goes out and gets shit-faced, he doesn't come home. Carmela is satisfied with this. It's not a problem if it's not in her house.
Still sleeping?
He's not home. He stayed with his friends.
Paulie's minions snag a bunch of supplies off of Christopher's father-in-law, and when Christopher confronts Paulie about this, it somehow ends up seeming like this whole exchange is Christopher's fault. Paulie calls Chrissy's father-in-law a crybaby, and when Chris raises his voice, Paulie tells him to lower his voice because of his neighbors.
Union.
Lower your voice. I got neighbors.
Fuck your neighbors. When you gonna pay me?
When you suck the money out of my ass.
Sure, I may have robbed someone in your family, but you shouldn't bring the neighbors into this drama. What the hell, man? It's more of the same story when Christopher brings his story to Tony. Tony brushes off Chris because he's having a discussion about an ongoing, potentially multi-million-dollar proposition here. He laughs at the idea of Chris's situation being about more than just money, and caps off this debate with yet another jab at Chris's sobriety.
Go have a live Ricky or whatever the fuck it is you're drinking these days, and we'll be done in a few minutes.
Chris vents to his fellow AA members about the hypocrisy of Tony and Paulie's expectations, initially appearing supportive of his sobriety, but then ultimately being unsupportive when he does not maintain a certain image.
I had the same thing at Unicorn. They were all on board for the intervention, but skip one golf outing and you're ostracized.
Chris has time and time again sacrificed his own agency for the approval of Tony and his peers. Tony speaks to Dr. Melfi about his situation with his son, despite what he initially told Christopher.
This whole disease concept, I think it's bullshit.
He grieves over AJ inheriting his disease.
My rotten fucking putrid genes have infected my kid's soul.
He mourns over this, but at the same time, he sends his son down a path that is not so different from himself. Paulie decides to steal from Christopher's father-in-law yet again, and this is the breaking point for Christopher. Words are no longer enough for him, and he retaliates by pushing little Paulie out of a window. When he has to speak to Tony about the consequences of this action, this scene is intercut with Paulie taking out his anger on Chris's home. The ugliness of this lifestyle is brought to his front yard for everyone to see. It is decided, like with most problems in this show, that this conflict will be settled with money from both sides. Tensions are high, but Chris brings his end of the deal, and so does Polly. Ready to put this past them, Chris sits with Polly to have a drink together. Polly tells the bartender to give Chrissy a club soda, but Christopher sees an opportunity to heal his relationship at the cost of his sobriety.
You know what? Fuck it. Whatever he's having.
AJ dives deeper and deeper into dude bro culture. After a few drinks, AJ decides to join them along for a ride to go see Victor, someone who has continuously failed to give them the money he owes them. Words are no longer enough to satisfy the frat guys, and they decide to enact their justice on Victor. AJ aids them in the beatdown and helps restrain the guy as they pour sulfuric acid on him. AJ just stares off as he becomes complicit in this violent act. Chris is a few drinks in, going on about the wonders of being a father and seeing a part of himself in his child's eyes. And all Polly can do is come up with a few smart remarks. Christopher looks around at a crowd that has never and will never take him seriously. There is no payoff to dropping to these people's level. He leaves in anger and retreats to the only guy he can speak to. JT Dolan, a fellow addict in recovery and a man who Christopher has threatened on numerous occasions, is met with a drunk Christopher at his doorstep. But Dolan handles this situation maturely. He offers Chris coffee in his relapse and tries to tell Chris to speak to his sponsor. Christopher hardly values the respect he is being given by Dolan. Dolan even brings up previous threats made toward him, but continuously handles this situation responsibly.
I let you be part of my movie. You let me?
He tells Chris that he's going to call his wife. Chris tries to deflect, but JT reminds Chris of the ugly truth.
We met in AA. Chris, you're in the mafia.
And then we are reminded of the ugly truth. Christopher Moltisanti is as much a victim as he is complicit in a horrible disease. He drags others down into his suffering, just like Paulie and just like Tony.
Give. It's all I ever do.
Tony comes home at the same time as AJ, both still having plenty of alcohol and misery in their system. Meadow is talking to Carmela about her mystery date, who we later find out has mob ties. They sit together, all of them complicit, but Carmela is satisfied with the illusion of a family being brought together by shared happiness. Christopher stumbles to the front door. He sees that one of his trees is still uprooted, and he puts it back in its place, as though creating the appearance of normalcy would be enough to atone for his sins.